I did. I feel like I came back exactly time. All good.
Yes, I looked at it. Yes, I did.
Hey, Pierre. Pierre.
I looked at it for you.
For those that are not aware, this road here, Main Street here in Rochester, which is also Indiana 25, is the actual part of the Trail of Death. And today we would like to ask God's blessing to come upon this today. Let us pray. Almighty ever-living God, your power conquers evil, and your love reigns over sin. May your Spirit most holy bless this passageway on these grounds, so it may be a way of healing to those who suffer and hope to those who seek your comfort. May this way be a trail of peace, and may you always guide our feet in your sacred ways. We ask you this in the name of Jesus the Lord.
Again, I want to welcome all of you. I'm Shirley Willard, Fulton County historian, and I was president of Fulton County Historical Society for 30 years, but I've been retired for a few years now. I'm 80, my husband in the front row is 85, and we're still doing volunteer work. First on the program, it's so last minute it didn't get on the program. The governor issued a proclamation, and so we have Representative Bill Friend here to read the proclamation, and his wife Ann is reading, and his email is B.A. Friend, and that's Bill and Ann Friend, and I thought, B.A. Friend, that's a very clever email address. So first thing here, we'll have Representative Friend. You represented Miami and Fulton counties.
And Cass.
And Cass. Okay, if you come up here.
And thank you, Shirley, for this. Certainly was a last-minute invitation. I was driving home from Indianapolis this morning when I got the call about 7:30. So it just so happened that this works out, and I'm very pleased to be with you here in Rochester. And this proclamation is from Governor of the state of Indiana, Eric Holcomb. And so I'm going to share it with you, so please listen as I read this Executive Department proclamation. To all to whom these presents may come, greetings. Whereas, during the period of 1820 to 1851, many Native American Indians were forced to leave Indiana and go west of the Mississippi River, resulting in loss of homeland, suffering, and death. And whereas, in 1838, the Potawatomi, and again in 1846, the Miami, were forced to leave their primary villages in northern Indiana. And whereas, removal from Indiana sadly resulted in the death of 42 Potawatomi, leading to the name Trail of Death, and of the death of at least 6 Miami Indians. And whereas, in 1976, Governor Otis Bowen dedicated a historical marker which was erected at Mud Creek to commemorate the first death. Governor Bowen's speech referred to the removal as a trail of courage. And whereas the legislatures of India passed resolutions in 1994 through 1996, declaring the Trail of Death a regional historic trail. And since then, historical markers and highway signs have been erected at each campsite, marking the roads taken. And whereas the Native American Indians served honorably in the United States Armed Forces, having served at a higher percentage than any other ethnic group. And whereas the state of Indiana recognizes the special and historical significance of the many Indian tribes that have their legacy cemented in Indiana history, as well as the sacrifices that these groups have made throughout the history of the state of Indiana. Now, therefore, I, Eric J. Holcomb, Governor of the state of Indiana, do hereby proclaim April 22nd, 2017 as Indiana Indian Day in the state of Indiana, and invite all citizens to duly note this occasion, signed by the Governor, Eric Holcomb. And I want to present this proclamation to Shirley on behalf of Governor Holcomb, and want to make sure that each of you know of the sincerity from Governor Holcomb that this proclamation would represent. And thank you for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you. I'm so very grateful to Bill Friend for coming, because here he was driving back to Indianapolis, and it just dawned on me this morning when I woke up and thought, we don't have anybody to read the proclamation. And so we got a hold of him, and he is a very kind person to come and do this. So now we'll go back to our printed program. Father Mike is going to tell us about how the Catholics have helped the Potawatomi, tell a little bit about Father Pettit and St. Philippine Duchesne.
We couldn't meet up with them until Danville. We're grateful for his ministry and outreach to the Potawatomi, even recognized by General Tipton himself, who invited him to be a part of the people that were helping the Potawatomi on the way out west. We know a lot of what happened because of his letters, and so we're grateful for his corresponding and his record of what happened. Unfortunately, during that trip, he was already coming down with fevers and whatnot. Barely made it back to St. Louis, where he died just a couple months short of his 28th birthday. So we remember them and many other courageous people who continue in that their spirit to reach out to others in the community and recognize their suffering.
Thank you, Father Mike. Several of you have already known me for many years because I've been working on this for many, many years. Because back in 1976, it was our middle son. We had 3 sons, and so the middle son helped erect that historical marker at Mud Creek for the first death on the Trail of Death. Been working on this ever since. Well, this year, our point is brought on by some very sad things that are happening here in northern Indiana. Indiana is suffering and trying to figure why, trying to get better. I can't say that God is punishing Indiana or all of America, but evil seems to grow where it gets a chance, a foothold. And it's pretty certain that the world is suffering from all the evil that is alive and growing around the globe. Can Indiana apologize and still be proud of its accomplishments? Yes, I think so, because we are human and we do both good and bad things. What can Indiana do to make up to the Indians? Treat them better, equal to whites. Allow Indian casinos and housing. Accept responsibility. Evil was not invented by white people. White men came. There was Russell Means, perhaps you remember him. He played the father in the Pocahontas movie. Anyway, Russell Means of the American Indian movement in the 1970s said that most of the modern world's troubles were caused by the European white men who ran amok. Today we will learn about the doctrine of discovery. Today, northern Indiana especially has become aware of the many problems here: high rate of cancer, suicide, addictions, poverty, and many spiritual problems. It's made many of us wonder if there is a connection to the evil done to the Potawatomi in the Miami here and all the other Native Americans. Did the forced removals of those loving, kind, neighborly, spiritual, and intelligent people plant evil here as an easy place for evil to grow? Many groups have been meeting to discuss this and pray to find answers. On my part, I've worked closely with the Potawatomi for over 30 years. We founded the Trail of Death Association. We organized commemorative caravans to go to Kansas every 5 years. We put up historical markers. I learned about the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, headquartered in Shawnee, Oklahoma. They are descendants of Chief Menominee and his mission band, who were marched at gunpoint down Rochester's main street September 5th, 1838. I learned a lot while putting this program together. For instance, I didn't know that people protested the Removal Act, wrote articles, held meetings to denounce Andrew Jackson for his part in getting the Removal Act passed by Congress. It sounds like some of the news today, doesn't it? We need to advocate for what we believe is right. I'm here today to express my sorrow that Indiana, land that I love, has such a sad history of treatment of the Native American Indians. Indiana means land of the Indians, but our state drove them out. We cannot change history, but we want to change Indiana's historic image. People here today do not feel like the land-hungry settlers who wanted the Indians gone. We feel Indiana would be a better place today if the Indians had not been forcibly removed. As George Stricker wrote, and it was in the Logansport paper today, George, too, the whole act of removing the Indians was not just a land grab. It was a failure of imagination and a failure of Christ's gospel of love. If we had let them remain, think what they could have taught us. think how they could have helped make right this attitude of viewing the land and all of nature as just a thing to be used up and thrown away. I thank all the people who suggested wording in parts of the program today. This has been truly a work of many minds and hearts. I'm privileged to introduce to you today several people with a wide spectrum of different information. They will educate us in many ways with their thoughts on this subject. Each person is limited to about 5 minutes, but you can talk to them more afterwards if you wish when we go to the parish hall. So the first person today is Nancy Kaufman and Jason Kaufman of Mennonite USA, and they're going to tell us about the doctrine of discovery. I bet you kids already knew about that, didn't you? Do they teach it in school anymore?
We will mention the doctrine of discovery, but we also want to do this in the form of confession and commitment to you folks. Jason Kaufman, who is Director of Archives, and I, Nancy Kaufman, who is denominational minister of Mennonite Church USA, are here to represent the wider church of Mennonite Church USA. But please know that we humbly stand before you to confess to you the Potawatomi people, Miami people, and other Native Americans of our shortcomings and blindness to the atrocities done to your ancestors and the ongoing results of those atrocities. We confess that we have not really known or understood your story of pain and suffering and injustice created by the violent acts towards your people. We confess that we have been ignorant of how our story intersects with your story, and it's been at your expense. We confess that sometimes it's been easy for us to absolve ourselves of what happened to you because we weren't here when it happened. But we in the Mennonite Church, through the last few years, have become aware of the doctrine of discovery. And no, it's most likely not taught in our school system, but it is basically a document which is a philosophical and legal framework dating back to the 1500s that gives Christian governments legal rights over indigenous lands and domination of indigenous people. This doctrine was firmly supported by the Christian church over the centuries, using a biblical foundation to justify the various acts of violence, of enslavement, extraction of resources, and extinction. The destruction of indigenous people and their way of life. It is an international law, legal structure, so embedded in our society and is still used today. We confess that the doctrine of discovery is a horrible misuse of the Bible and something that God does not condone for one people to do to another. Our awareness of this doctrine has caused us to re-examine our behaviors in the past and to think about our behaviors in the future. We confess that we have never acknowledged or understood that we benefited from the forced removal of your people when we purchased land that was stolen from you. We confess that we have been silent and oftentimes blind participants in a society that has gravely sinned against you and continues to sin against you. We believe it is the church that must now work against the continued use of the doctrine of discovery and work toward right relationships with indigenous people here in the United States and around the world, with you, the Potawatomi and Miami and other Native Americans in Indiana.
Therefore, we commit to learning and telling the stories of this tragic part of our state's history so that the suffering of your people may not be forgotten. We pledge to support the efforts of educators like Adam Friesen at Bethany Christian Schools and instructors at the Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary, who are teaching their students about the history of the Potawatomi and the Miami, their forced removal from Indiana, and the ways that various groups of people, including Mennonites, have benefited at their expense. Second, we commit to supporting the ongoing work of the Dismantling the Doctrine of Discovery Coalition, which is a movement made up of Mennonites and other Anabaptist people of faith, some of whom are here today. Part of the function of the coalition is to educate Mennonites and Anabaptists across North America and other people about the doctrine of discovery itself. We affirm the work of the coalition, the work that the coalition is doing to develop study guides and Bible reflections used by Mennonite congregations across the United States. As Christians, we believe that these efforts are especially important because they help establish a biblical foundation to expose the misinterpretation of God's word that 15th century Christians used to justify their actions. We also affirm the coalition's commitment to forming relationships and standing together with Native American brothers and sisters in their efforts to actively dismantle the doctrine of discovery at every level of society, in our laws and policies, in our states, in our communities, in our church institutions, and in our congregations. Finally, we commit to seeking to learn with and from you how the harm done in the past that continues today may somehow be ameliorated. We admit that we don't know what that may look like, but we understand that our well-being depends on your well-being. It is our prayer today that Mennonite Church USA and its members can learn alongside you, and that we can imagine and build a better, more just future together. Thank you.
Thank you. The short version of the doctrine of discovery is simply you go plant a flag and say, that's mine. We did that with the moon, but there was no people there, unless they're on the other side hiding from us. Probably going to do that with Mars, too, they're talking about. Next on the program is Peg Willman. She works with Treasures of the Heart Ministries. She's going to talk about the loss of spirituality in northern Indiana, I believe.
Well, good afternoon. Wow, when you sit in the front, the back shows up. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank Shirley for asking me to say a few words and some of my thoughts of living in this community for just really the last 5 years from the spiritual aspect. And I want to thank Father Michael for allowing me a platform in his church to speak some of my thoughts. Today we're here in an attempt to make a wrong into a right, to reestablish a healthy spiritual unity and publicly apologize to our Native American Indians, to set in motion, I hope, a spiritual healing for the Native American Indians as well as for those who currently live in Rochester, Indiana. After reading and studying and doing some research, I discovered many interesting things affecting our community, and possibly they have a direct correlation to the mistreatment of the Native American Indians in our community many years ago. History records the Potawatomi Indians were rounded up and their removal occurred in 1838. And with this research, I also found out that our government did something like a takeover with the Hawaiian Indians and on the Hawaiian Islands in around 1893. I thought that was interesting. I would hope that we would have learned from the first round that maybe that wasn't a good way to handle things, but apparently not. Anyway, but with that, the history records that in most situations there was a pattern of ignorance and impure hearts on the part of our government, with both groups being greatly mistreated. And I believe many negative consequences remain to this day due to the government's actions in both situations. I do believe there is evidence, a spiritual aspect to this, of damage done that correlates with the mistreatment of the Potawatomi Indians in particular for here. I believe there's a need to set things straight and release all parties to live in a better spiritual climate and hopefully produce a much healthier community here in Rochester and Fulton County. History records that this was the single largest Indian removal in Indian history. Part of that makes me very sad that that occurred here in this community, but sad that it even happened at all. The trail of death seems to have carried over to our present time. The Potawatomi Indians were removed. The removal was done against their will. It was forcing them to give up their land, and it was forcing them to walk hundreds of miles as they watched some of their family and friends die along the way. As a community, we seem to be walking down our own trail of death. Here are some of the ways I believe we are suffering as a community, a slow death. The name Rochester actually means fortress. And I see many conditions in Rochester which indicate a closed off and tightly held area with few chances to move up or move forward. Why is that? Just as a question. And can we change the general and spiritual climate of Rochester into a positive fortress that displays a safe and healthy environment? Other possible ramifications of this abuse: Indiana has multiple health conditions affecting our state. As a state, we have a very high rate of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and suicide in comparison to most of the other states within our nation. Fulton County also has a very high suicide and cancer rate per capita than other counties in Indiana. Research even shows that Indiana as a whole has a 20% suicide rate. And it's our 5th leading cause of death. Why is that? Where did that come from? Rochester has 1 registered sex offender for every 144 adults, with 43 individuals registered as of just last Thursday, the 20th of 2017. Expressed to me personally, without me prompting them, a sense of darkness and heaviness as they approach the county and the city of Rochester. Makes one wonder what happened, that those who don't live here can feel or notice a difference. Where did the heaviness and the darkness come from? As I look for examples in Scripture to bring some possible understanding to our present situation, 2 Samuel chapter 24 comes to mind. In verse 10 it says, "And David's heart condemned him, for he numbered the people. So David said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I have done. But now I pray, O Lord, take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have done very foolishly." Is there still a need to ask for forgiveness for foolish decisions of the past? And for us to take the necessary steps in correcting this mistreatment and stop any possible judgment that has come to our county or city? Also in the book of Joshua, the Israelites were defeated at Ai because a man took what didn't belong to him. This brought a curse that held the Israelites from protection as well as a place of victory. In Joshua chapter 7, verse 12, it says, "Therefore the children of Israel could not stand before their enemies, but turned their back from their enemies because they had become doomed to destruction." Part of verse 13 in Joshua 7 says, "You cannot stand before your enemies until you take the accused thing from among you." The United States government took away Indian land as well as broke established treaties. Can we make a correlation between what befell the Israelites and where we are in this current situation? I believe our government and those involved have brought a level of destruction to our county and city because our ancestors took what did not belong to us. I looked up the biblical meaning of the year this removal took place, 1838. The number 18 biblically means bondage, and the number 38 means slavery. I find it very interesting. The year of this forced removal would hold the meaning of bondage and slavery, which is exactly what was done to the Potawatomi Indians, and may be the very climate we are still dealing with today. It's interesting that the current year, 2017, also holds a powerful meaning for where we are today. The biblical number 20 is redemption, and the biblical number 17 is victory. Isaiah 55, 6 through 7 says, "Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, and he will have mercy on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon." If the Lord will pardon us when we return to him, why would we not ask for forgiveness and turn a wrong inflicted on the American Native Indians into a right, releasing everyone from any and all curses? As I look at Rochester's current trail of death, I don't think we can afford to waste any more time. We need to move quickly, taking every step necessary to turn this trail of death into a new road that leads to a trail of victory. I heard Father Mike say a trail of peace when he was out front. By the way, I appreciated that was powerful up there. Thank you. And so a trail of peace or a trail of victory, releasing everyone from all forms of bondage and slavery. As Moses answered the call and led the Israelites to the promised land, I'm aware of many Moseses living in Rochester who see the need, are answering the call for change, as well as working to help make positive changes for the good of our community. With this public apology to our Native American friends, we can help change the spiritual climate as well as working to produce a healthier community for everyone who lives in Indiana, especially Fulton County and the city of Rochester. Thank you.
Well, I told you we were going to learn some new things. One thing as a historian I need to point out is that the Trail of Death removal was not the largest in the country, but the largest in Indiana. The Trail of Tears, removing Cherokees from the Smoky Mountains, is probably the largest. I think it is the largest. George and Michelle Schroeder are now going to present a song that George wrote especially for Chief Menominee. And Michelle, you're going to teach the sign language so we can recite it.
We'd like you all to learn sign language if you could, or if if that's something that you find difficult, just sing with us or pray as we sing this song about Menominee, which was really written as one of my first acts of atonement for for the trail of death, which my grandfather informed me about. So it comes sort of directly through my grandfather, Henry F. Schricker, and to me. And then also, I don't think I would have ever probably had a place to develop or sing the song without Shirley Willard. So, you know, I just think we all need to give her a nice hand. I'm going to let Michelle teach you this.
Okay, so I'm going to be doing some what we call American Sign Language, and I'd like to teach you that for the chorus of this song about Chief Menominee. So first thing, you just need to warm up your hands a little bit. Great. And the sign for Native American is this. So put these two fingers together and three up like that, and then you place it next to your lips, and then move it up like this. So we say, that's a sign, I'm sorry, this is a sign for Native Americans. So for Menominee, we're actually going to be doing the letter M. And the M is just three fingers straight out, and it goes like this in the place where Native Americans would be. So try that with me, and say Menominee. Try that, Menominee. There, great. And this is the sign for man. You have an open hand like this, touch your forehead and bring it down to your chest. That's for man. So it goes like this. Try it with me. Menominee, say it with me. Menominee, good. The man, good. Who won't sign. So shake your head like this. Put out the piece of paper. And like the Native American here, we're writing. And you won't sign. So say that with me. Won't sign. Good. Let's put all that together. Menominee. Go ahead and say it great. The man who won't sign. Great. Won't give up. Just stir your hands and shake your head. No. Won't give up. Try that. Won't give up. And his honor is with an H. So there's two fingers like this. And honor is coming off of the head and up. Like this. Honor. Like an acknowledgement to the Great Spirit. So we'll put that all together. Menominee. Great. Doing a good job. Menominee. The man who won't sign, won't give up his honor, and then put his land, and the land, just feel the earth in your hands here, put his land, put on the line back there. He won't sign his name to the treaty to give away the land, okay? So all that together, Menominee, the man who won't sign, won't give up his honor, put his land on the line. Got a little bit more here, we'll try that. They cut, which is not the greatest sign, but they cut like this. They cut down your garden. Garden is two hands like this, and it's just kind of bringing the earth around you like you have a circle garden. So won't cut down your garden. Try that with me. Won't cut down your garden, left hardly a trace. You put your hands here like there's something, and then you let it go. Left hardly a trace, good, of your beautiful. It's a great sign. You sweep your face, because they're all beautiful. You sweep your beautiful face, open it, close it down like a flower petal, and then open it up again. Try it with me. Beautiful. Say that with me. Beautiful. Can you tell I used to be a teacher? Okay. Beautiful soul. Soul's a great sign. Put your hand out open like this. We're going to go down and deep into you and find your soul. Down with your fingers and bring that up and shake it up. Your spirit moving and vibrating. A beautiful soul, or your beautiful, one more sweet. Close it, open it up. Raise. And back to the sign for Native American. Raise. So let's do that last part together. Won't cut, try it with me, won't cut down your garden, left hardly a trace of your beautiful soul or your beautiful race. Okay, let's try it with the melody now. Good job, good job.
We'll do the super slow version.
Menominee,
won't give up his honor, put his land on the line. They cut down your garden, left hardly a trace of your beautiful soul or your beautiful race. Members of the council, the president does not know the truth. He, like me, has been lied to and deceived. He would not remove me from my lands, the graves of my people who have gone to the Great Spirit, nor allow you to tell me that your braves will come and take me, tied up like a dog, if he knew the truth. My brothers, the president is just, but he listens to the words of the young chiefs who have lied. I will not leave my lands. I will not hear about it anymore. They came to your chapel on a hot summer's day with bayonets on their rifles. They had little to say. They tied you with ropes, tied you with chains, and they marched you like criminals across the hot plains. Menominee, the man who won't sign, won't give up his honor, put his land on the line. They cut down your garden, left hardly a trace of your beautiful soul or your beautiful race. Names on a treaty, 26 in all, but the name that mattered most wasn't there at all. No, he knew about the whiskey, and he knew about those goals. It was written in those faces, written in those souls. Menominee, the man who won't sign, won't give up his honor, put his land on the line. They cut down your garden, left hardly a trace of your beautiful soul or your beautiful race. 14,000 acres in 1838 for $14,000 and a land they'd never seen. They called the white man holy and called the red man savage. Then they burned down every wigwam, subdivided every dream. Menominee, the man who won't sign, won't give up his honor, put his land on the line. They cut down your garden, left hardly a trace of your beautiful soul or your beautiful race.
That is such a moving song. Brings tears to our eyes. Adam Friesen now with his Bethany Christian School of Goshen. The fourth graders are going to tell stories. I don't know, you're going to show the whole cakes the water? Where is the water, Bill? Oh, he's got the water. He went and got some water out of the Tippecanoe River this morning. You don't have to drink it, but one just showed up with one. Okay.
You can just set it down. We'll show the water afterward. We'll set up a display, and you can ask more about that.
Thank you for coming to our special Potawatomi Remembrance Day. Our class has learned about Potawatomi for a long time now, and we have even made small skits about them. We have gone on the trail of death and looked at landmarkers. We are doing all this to remember the Potawatomi and their touching story. In a moment, we will show you a skit we made about Billy Ward when he was taken from his friends. There are some Potawatomi still living today, and some of them are with us right now. Our goal of this project is to teach about the Potawatomi story because even though it happened about 200 years ago, it can still happen today. If you learn anything from what we have to say today, maybe you can share this story with others too.
This is a history. This is a history textbook from 1991. Some of our parents may have used similar textbooks in the 4th grade. This is what it says about the Potawatomi. In Vincennes, Governor Harrison set up his government and started to work. He made many treaties with the Indians. In these treaties, the Indians agreed to move from their lands. Sometimes the United States government paid them, and sometimes the Indians just moved farther west. The paragraph isn't lying, it just leaves out a lot of important information. Billy and his family were some of the first people to start a life here in Rochester, Indiana. They cut down trees in thickly wooded areas and began building relationships with neighboring families. Billy and his friends enjoyed playing jacks and exploring the woods around their house. As they settled in, Billy also became friends with a few boys from the nearby Potawatomi village. One day, Billy and his friends were playing jacks when they noticed something in the distance. And Billy asked, "What's going on?" "I don't know," replied his friend. As they continued to look, Billy and his friends realized that a long line of people were walking. And eventually, they recognized some of the adult men and women from his Potawatomi friends, James and Abraham's village. Billy's mom was outside working, so he turned towards her and asked, "Mom, those are the Potawatomi from James and Abraham's village. What's going on?" Billy's mom knew what was going on and how her children would react, so she simply said, "I'm sure it's nothing. Don't worry about it, Billy." Billy waited for his mom to go back inside, then got up. His friends, confused because their host was leaving, started to ask where he was going. But he was gone before they had a chance. Billy ran toward the group, frantic to find his Potawatomi friends, James and Abraham, among the crowd. Billy was exhausted from running and exclaimed between breaths, "I found you! I've been looking forever." James, one of the Potawatomi boys, said, "Billy, I was so worried that I wouldn't see you again." Billy asked, "What's going on here anyway?" James told them about how they had been trapped in their church. After 3 days, they were forced out of their church and had to start walking. But they didn't know where they were going. As they walked away, their church, houses, and fields had been burned down. He explained that they were hot, tired, and thirsty too. Billy was confused and said that he didn't want his friends to leave, that it wasn't fair. He even said that he was Steve, he could hide him in his room. James noticed that Billy was upset, and even though he was feeling devastated himself, tried to calm down his friend. He said that since his entire village had been burned down, he wouldn't have a place to go back to. Again, Billy noticed how terrible the situation was, and after trying to figure out what to do for a while, he decided the best thing to do would be to walk with his friends to wherever they were going. After a few miles, Billy started to hear his name in the distance. It was his mom looking for him. but it went so badly to stay with his friends, so he tried hiding behind Abraham, but she eventually found him. He pleaded with her to let him stay, to let him with his friends. There had to be something she could do so his friends didn't have to go away. But she insisted that they were keeping their home, that James and Abraham would be okay. Billy's mom pulled him away, and James assured Billy that it was all right, that he needed to stay with his family, just as they needed to stay with theirs. As they continued walking, Billy stood by the road and waved goodbye for the last time. James and Abraham continued on with their village, reassuring Billy they would never forget him and hope that they would do the same. Our 4th grade class has felt that God is calling us to hear the Potawatomi story. We would hate it if this story was forgotten. The Potawatomi were forced off their land by the Indiana government in 1838. We can only hope for a better way. When the Potawatomi were walking to Kansas, many people felt sorry for them and made them hoe cakes. Hoe cakes are cornmeal pancakes. After our time here together, we will offer you some hoe cakes. Just a minute ago, you heard one of my friends read the paragraph that many of you were taught. In this paragraph, a particular sentence struck me. This sentence is, in these treaties, the Indians agreed to move from their lands. In reality, they only agreed to move from their lands sometimes. Even in sadness, we can hope for a better way.
Finally, there's a person shorter than me. When I taught school, those kids were a whole taller than me. Number 8 on our list is Potawatomi descendant Bob Pearl from Parma Heights, Ohio. He's going to tell about his ancestors on the Trail of Death. Bob is too modest to tell you, but he's 90 years old.
Well, I'm Potawatomi from the Citizen Band Nation in Shawnee, Oklahoma. I was born on reservation land in Kansas, and my daughter, who was passing out programs out here in front, is also Potawatomi, and she's with me today. I want to thank Shirley Willard for having me. She has asked me to speak today as a representative of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. And that is what I'm here to do. I've known Shirley Willard, as many of the rest of you probably have too, back into the 1980s when she was planning the first caravan to retrace the trail all the way from Menominee Statue around Plymouth all the way to Sugar Creek, Kansas. It's and as it's been stated, that was in 1838, around the 1st of September. There were approximately 850, or a few more maybe, of Indians who had been rounded up around Menominee's lands. And they were, had been promised in a way that they wouldn't have to be removed. Now, Andrew Jackson had signed the Indian Removal Act back in 1830, and they gave the Indians 8 years to remove themselves west of Mississippi. Well, the governor of Indiana had got with the U.S. Army and said that they wanted the Indians moved now. So John Tipton, General John Tipton, got the group of soldiers and they made a plan to round them up so that anybody within maybe a 50-mile radius of that area was considered a possible Potawatomi that belonged to the Menominee tribe, which is around Plymouth. Anyway, they arrived there one Sunday and they locked up the men, Indian men, in the chapel area, and they sent the ladies home with kids, I guess, to get whatever they could carry and be back in 3 days. Now you can imagine what that must have meant to all those families that were in that area, because they had to be back in 3 days, which they did. They came back, but it was only with what they could carry. The U.S. government had promised them that there would be wagons and there would be food that would be provided on their removal. But here they got there, and there were very few wagons, and there were wagon masters that the government was paying to go that 660 miles. Well, it ended up that as they came down the main street here in Rochester, they were pretty much walking single file. And so they were headed for Logansport, and they made about 15 miles a day on this trail. And of course, many of them became ill right away just from the walk from here to Logansport. And so they opened a temporary hospital down there, and for about 100 out of the 850, they left them there until they recovered from the flu or whatever it was. And so that was one of the first things that happened on the trail. Bishop Brute was over there at that site, and he was baptizing the ones that needed to be baptized and confirmed or whatever into the Catholic Church. And so Father Pettit was up here around Notre Dame, where they have the chapel there on the grounds. And so he was wanted to go with the Indians, and the bishop said, "No, you can't go." Well, after the bishop saw those 100 people down there so ill and pleading that Father Pettit go, that's when Father Mike just said that Father Pettit joined the trail when they got to Illinois. And so the Potawatomi were so close to Father Pettit that as they progressed down the trail, there were deaths almost every day. And so they would just stop, or maybe, I don't know whether they buried them in the evening, probably, with ponds and the low plants. And so they developed, a lot of them died from typhoid fever. And so that was a blow to the parents and everybody who was on the trail. Now, they finally got to Sugar Creek, and the Jesuit priests had their ministry mainly in St. Louis, and so they had heard that Potawatomis, who they knew were a Catholic tribe, were going to be down at Sugar Creek, because the government had a small reserve down there. And so they sent 2 priests down and to take care of the religious side of their faith. And so that was a blessing in a way. But when they did finally reach Sugar Creek, there wasn't anything planned. No homes were planned for them. And it was coming into the winter season, and it happened that there was a beautiful spring along Sugar Creek, and it constantly flowed with water. So that Sugar Creek. So that was their source of water, directly from this spring, for the next 10 years that they were down at Sugar Creek. And so it was, they had to, the first winter, they had to try to be protected by the cliffs or hills that were there. And I suppose they used deer skins and things to shelter themselves. But they lost so many. About that first year, they lost about 100 people that passed away. And so the Jesuits kept track of everybody that died. And I've got the list of them by year from 1838 all the way till 1848, when they were moved again. And so that's quite a list. So we talked about Chief Menominee. Well, he died short, not long. Oh, they put the chiefs, I think there were 3 or 4, in a jail wagon and chained them down. And they were finally freed after Father Pettit met them out over in Indiana, Illinois. And so it was really nice that Father Pettit had been allowed to go. But he went on. Anyway, my ancestor was a young girl about 3 to 5 years old on this trail. And the people that died were either mostly the elderly or the youngsters. There were babies born along the way, and some of them didn't survive either. So that number of 40 to some 42 was that was a sad note on the trail. Anyway, my great grandmother's name was Teresa Patnika. Was a family name. Now, she had an older sister who, I don't know how many years older, but maybe 5 or 6 years older than she. So the parents died either along the way or before they even left here in Indiana. And we have no record other than the name that the government had that for the list of people that were on the trail of death. So we can't trace our Indian ancestry beyond that particular place. So anyway, Teresa was young. So the Jesuits, after being down there for about 3 years, the Bishop from Dubourg from St. Louis went to France, and they were always looking for young men to come over that would become priests. But they knew that the girls were not being educated. And the Jesuits were, or have always been, very much for education. And they'll do anything to make sure that you're educated. I went through St. Louis University, and they were, well, I grew up in St. Mary's Mission in St. Mary's, Kansas. And the Jesuits were there from 1848 until about 1980, something like that. So I grew up where they had their own seminary there, and the Jesuits had 13 years of training before they would be become priests. What they did, the last 4 years were spent at St. Mary's Mission in Kansas. They would bring them from St. Louis or wherever they were. So we had that kind of education in our town after the 1860s, when the Indians had been removed to Oklahoma. And so that took, but the government was very much aware of the fact that the Potawatomi tribe, in 1848, the U.S. government decided that they were going to take all, there were Potawatomis that had been on the west side of Lake Michigan, and they had moved them in 1837 over to Iowa. And then there was another group that they moved, and they weren't forced removals, but they removed them over to northern Missouri. And then that happened again for another settlement. So you had Potawatomis at Sugar Creek, you had Potawatomis in Iowa, and you had two groups in northern Missouri. So the government says, we're going to provide a 30 square mile reservation and bring these 4 Potawatomi tribes together, which they did. And so the priests at Sugar Creek took some of the Indians from there, and they went up to along the Kansas River, where you could have farming, or you could have cattle in the upper lands in this 30 square mile area. And so these 4 different parts of the Potawatomi joined on that one reservation. And so that didn't work really well, because you had the Catholics that came from Menominee side, and then you had other missionaries that had other faiths, that they joined them all together. And so at first there was some kind of resistance about where you lived on the 30 square mile reservation. Well, that was pretty well resolved with the help of the priests. But we get back to St. Rose Philippine Duchesne, and the Jesuits had gone to Europe, brought back 4 sisters to be down at Sugar Creek. And so the 4 sisters, then they built a school for the girls down there. So they were educated for those 8 years they were there. And then of course, the boys had their own school. And So when we were told that they were going to move again, then the Jesuits went up there and they picked, along with the Indian agents, picked out where they were going to have St. Mary's Mission move. And so they moved the mission then up right along the Kansas River. And then they built, in fact, they built this, this was about 1860. They built this, they had a brickyard. They made their own bricks. So they built this beautiful, big building, about 4 stories high, for the sisters to educate the girls. So the Indian girls. So then they also built a school for the boys. And then they built a cathedral for the bishop that was assigned from Kansas City to the Rocky Mountains. And so that was a part of the story. But anyway, my great-grandmother, Teresa, grew up, and she and her sister were orphans. So the other Indian families, I'm sure, pitched in and helped them out. But then the thing was that they moved when everybody finally got moved together, then they started associating with it. But then 1861 came along, and the government offered citizenship for any of those Indians that wished to become citizens. And this was unheard of. So my great-grandmother had met the bishop's carriage driver, Jim Slavin. They were an Irish family that had settled in St. Louis. Well, then Jim Slavin and Teresa were married in 1861. So they decided that they would become citizens. And so he got 160 acres, and she got 80 acres right next to it. Well, that was a godsend to them, because the Slavin side knew more about farming than taking care of land. But there was about 2/3 of that Potawatomi, the big Potawatomi reservation. Quite a few of them took land. Well, they didn't know how to handle it. Then the the immigrants from Europe began to come in, and so they started to take away or live on some of the land, and so they lost, the Indians lost ownership in their land. So about 1868, then they had another treaty, and they decided they'd pay any of those that lost their land. They'd give them $9,000, and they would take them to Oklahoma, the Indian Territory, and they could each have 160 acres down there. And so that's what quite a few of them did. But my side of the family decided to stay in Kansas, and so they retained that land. That land was in our hands for many, many years. So anyway, Teresa, not only Teresa, but all the Indian families that stayed in Kansas, and the ones in this big reservation, they really received a good education from either the Jesuits or the Sacred Heart nuns. Well, the one nun, St. Rose Philippine de Shem, had been down to Sugar Creek, and that's when my great-grandmother Teresa was maybe 5 years old, in that age group. and the other daughter was older. Well, she married the headsman of the Potawatomi tribe that was at Sugar Creek. And so they, when they got to St. Mary's, then he was also the headsman, and so they gave him twice as much land and gave his sister 80 acres. And it was all together in the same tracts of land where my grandfather, or great-grandmother, and grandfather had this land. So it's that, but there was a lot of, the main problem was the trail of death, and coming to the end of it was a sad. I want to thank all of you for the sentiment that you have expressed so far during these talks for being so generous to speak of the Indians in a favorable way. Thank you very much.
I understand it's an Indian tradition that the older you are, the wiser you are. And that's why I said that about Bob. And that's why I said that about my age and my husband's age. We're glad to be as old as we are. And we do learn new things every day. And I'm very glad for what Bob shared with us. Tracy Locke and her daughter Erin from Lafayette are also descendants of the Potawatomi here on the Trail of Death. So Tracy.
Good afternoon. I would like to begin by thanking Shirley for all the work that she's done in planning this event and all the work that you've done on the Trail of Death Association. Shirley's brought a lot of attention to the Indian removals, and I would also like to thank the town of Rochester for organizing this event. As Shirley said, my name is Tracy Locke, and this is my daughter Erin. We are members of the Potawatomi Nation, the Citizen Band Potawatomi, and we live in Lafayette, Indiana. The grandfather I will be speaking of today descended from many Potawatomi leaders, including his grandfather Chabas Anaquipla and his uncle Tokanabi. Nan Weshma, whose American name was Abram Burnett, was born in northern Indiana in 1812, and he was forced out of Indiana in September of 1838. He spent a good part of his life, his childhood in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and he was sent to study at the Choctaw Academy in Kentucky. He returned to live in Pokagon's village for a few years before settling in Menominee's village with his Potawatomi wife. My grandfather was 26 years old when he was forced out of Indiana. The conditions he and our people were forced to endure were unimaginable. When I think of the land squatters taking claim to my ancestors' village and setting fire to everything before they were even out of sight breaks my heart. What were my ancestors thinking, and I wonder often what the parents and the children and the elders were thinking. I would imagine that the only hope they had at that point was the promise that there would be shelters for them and provisions in Sugar Creek, Kansas. After walking for 3 months in a drought with little food to eat and burying their children and elders on the trail, they arrived in Sugar Creek. There was no promised shelter. There were no provisions, and they spent the winter of 1838 doing what they could to protect themselves from the winter conditions. My grandfather survived the terrible conditions that he was forced to walk in, but his wife died soon after they arrived in Sugar Creek. The priest who was assigned to minister to the Potawatomi, Father Benjamin Cudditt, was ordered to return to Indiana. He was very ill, so my grandfather grandfather accompanied him to help in his weakened condition. Father Pettit died when they arrived in St. Louis, and my grandfather continued to Indiana and brought his silver chalice as well as his personal items to give to Bishop Brute in Vincennes, Indiana. My grandfather returned to Sugar Creek and lived there for about 21 years before moving to the Potawatomi Reservation in Kansas. Many of my family members were removed from Indiana to Sugar Creek and died there. Last summer, I took my daughter on a trip following the Trail of Death to Sugar Creek, and it was very emotional for us both to spend time there. But my family story does not end at Sugar Creek. This is the next generation. I've taught my daughter to be thankful for the sacrifices her ancestors made and to take advantage of the opportunities she now has that her ancestors didn't have but fought for. I have taught her to put God first in her life, to get an education, continue to learn her culture, make a difference in her tribe, and pass our stories on to the next generation. She will be heading to Purdue in the fall, where she will study communications and journalism, and she hopes to use her education to write about her tribe from a Native perspective. As a follower of Christ, I do not believe that we are held accountable for the sins of others, even if they are our family members. We are held accountable for our own actions and how we treat others. Mark 12:31 calls us to love our neighbor as ourselves. We should learn from our past and teach our children the lessons that we've learned. I hope that this event and our stories will encourage you to teach your children the truth. We cannot depend on public education and history books to tell our stories correctly. I encourage you to take your children to Native American cultural events, take them on the Trail of Death, show them our history. It's up to us as parents and grandparents to teach the next generation. Thank you.
Abram Burnett became a great chief there in Kansas, and he was a huge man, about 400 pounds. We have a picture of him at the museum, so if you ever get out to the Fulton County Museum, be sure and look at the picture of Abram Burnett. He was a legendary person. By the way, when he took the Father Pettis things to Vincennes, and he came back up to Rochester, and he found that he had a trading post here, and somebody broke into it and stole his things. So he found out who it was, and he filed in the Rochester courthouse, which at that time was just a wooden building. And the court said that he was to be paid $200. I don't know if they've ever collected it. But it's right there in our courthouse. One of the very first things that ever happened was a suit by Abram Burnett in 1839. So it's amazing the things that we can find. I mean, I never thought that I'd find anything about that in our courthouse. But somehow I got wind of it and did. We're very honored today. I don't know as much about the Miami as I do about the Potawatomi, but we're going to learn about that today, too. So we have Miami Indians of Indiana, Brian Buchanan and his chief, Vice Chief Donnie in here with us, too, or just Brian? Okay. Mike there.
Yahweh Melakoke, Nika, Tapaka Nialani. It means greetings, my family and my friends. My name is Chief Brian Buchanan Kima Tindekisa, the principal chief of the Miami Nation of Indians of the state of Indiana. Going on the 16th year term this year. Hopefully have tribal elections coming up. First of all, I want to thank Shirley for including us. Often that doesn't happen with the Indian land. And also to Father Missionewe, thank you very much for welcoming us into your home. This is a great honor for this proclamation to be issued today. for the governor to agree with the citizens. It's a landmark. It's an epitome of citizenship in the state of Indiana right now, and I thank the governor. Unfortunately, I don't have that feeling with state legislation and haven't for many, many years. What I'm going to talk about today is it's a little bit different story than the Potawatomis. The Miami's history often was documented by French Jesuit priests back in the 1700s, early 1800s. Our history is a spoken word. So what we know and what we learn is passed down from our grandfathers and grandmothers. A lot of it has been lost. So a lot of the statistics and stories we hear and talk about, I can't always verify that they're truth, other than that's what was told to us by our families. Back, the Treaty of St. Mary's was one of the first treaties, well, Treaty of Greenville, but the Treaty of St. Mary's where Miami got land allotments. And in 1930, of course, everybody knows about the Indian Removal Act. 1940, more lands were released by the Miami Indians. And at that point, from 1840 to 1846, it's written that there was approximately 500. Again, I can't verify that because I haven't seen any written documentation. That doesn't mean that it's not out there. There could be someone who's studied it. But it could mean that from 1840 to 1846, there weren't that many that actually did get removed. In 1846 was the biggest one, and I can attest to this, that there was, again, I'm not the tribal historian, but between 87 and 89 Miami. We know that for a fact because it is documented. Those Miami were put on riverboats. They were hoarded like cattle down Main Street in Peru, and they were escorted by the cavalry, and they were put on those riverboats and shipped out to Kansas. On the canal boats on the Wabash River, down to the Mississippi, and transferred over to steamboats, then into Kansas. At around, I think it was around late 1860s, those families in Kansas did get removed to the reservation land in Oklahoma, which is where the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma is residing now with their tribal leadership, and they are federally recognized. In 1854, it was the federal government that took that treaty and recognized both eastern and western bands of Miami. Now, mind you, we're all the same people. So those who were removed, the animosity of being removed, then you have those who were allowed to stay because we still had land allotments, but we're the same families. It was a divide and conquer. And to this day, we still have the same treatment. Even though this proclamation is taken care of, please don't leave here today thinking all is well. Actions speak louder than words. And like I said, legislation in Indiana done nothing to help the Indiana Miami. Okay? And we still fight that to this day. Right now, we have, this last year when we celebrated the bicentennial, I was honored to be one of the torch carriers down Main Street. And it was deja vu for me. So I'm walking west carrying a torch. I could envision our Miami brothers and sisters walking back east, being escorted by the cavalry, being put on those riverboats. It was bittersweet. I was honored that we were included again by the state. And again, it was the state citizens that actually included us. But then again, here we are going through what we're going through right now. To see half the tribe being split up has been a very disheartening feeling that the Indiana Miami that still live here that were never removed. And a lot of people, including some of the Miami out in Oklahoma, look down on us thinking that we think that we're all that because we still live here. And that's not it. And to prove that, the Tribal Council in the last 10 or 15 years, and I don't know how long we've been doing it, and we'll continue to do it as long as I have anything to say about it on Tribal Council, and I think some of our council members will agree. We have a memorial march, and that memorial march happens at our Peru Tribal Complex right there in downtown Peru. And at that time, we take and lead that drum with the beginning of the march. The city of Peru backs us, and I invite you all to come. It's the third weekend, third Sunday of October. The removal, the big removal that everyone speaks about for the Miami was October 6th. We can't hit that date because we have so many Miamis coming from so many different places in Indiana. We have over 60 counties with Miami families. We're spread all over. We have over 60 major cities and county seats, including Indianapolis, that's given us proclamations for the government-to-government relationship with the Miami tribe of Indiana. But again, like I said, those are the citizens and those are the local people like you all that come out today to say thank you, we're sorry, and we thank you for that. But just keep in mind, it's not over. We still fight this. Those that are out in Oklahoma, we pay tribute to them every October. We march over with our drum meeting, then our council, then our elders. I believe it's our elders and then our council. And we walk it. Even the elders. And those who can't walk, we make sure they get to the river by caravan. We go over to the Old Olson Theater there at Cabana, and we have a memorial service. A huge pipe ceremony is performed. The Women's Council then take all of those 80 plus names, I think it's around 88, and by natural wreath that they have made, they walk over to that bridge in Peru, and they float all those names down that river, and we watch it go out. And it's a very solemn moment, but yet it's a proof that just because they're there and we're here, we aren't the same, we are the same. And we prove that every year. And we invite everyone out to come out and join us to do that. And again, like I said, the mayor is always behind us, and all the citizens, and they close down the roads just like they did for you all out here. And I just want to say that it does our hearts good for you to include us today. And thank you very much, and we hope to see you in October.
There's two more down in there. I framed copies of this to give to me. Every year. And here, I'm just 20 miles from Peru, but I never knew it. It's amazing. We learn things every day. So let's all go down there. What
You're
day is
welcome.
it going to be?
It's the third Sunday of October. That's all I can tell you. I don't know the date. It changes year to year. So that's our general meeting, so we try to do it all in one day.
Yeah. Bob and Tracy, would you come up too and we'll give you copies of this?
Thank you.
You want to wait and get a picture of your
Sure.
Tracy and where'd Bob go? Yeah, could you come up? We've got framed ones to give to you too. So we've got framed the proclamation to give to each of the 3 tribal representatives here, Potawatomi and Miami. And we're so proud of you, Aaron, that you're going to carry on. We love you. Okay. Done? Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate you and you and Tracy and Aaron. We've known Erin since she was, how old was she? Like 2 or 3 years old at the first trail of death, the marker dedication.
Great.
Now we have a local family that has been very, very active in promoting their Native American history. And they had a person on the Indiana Bicentennial Torch Relay too. So Joanne Carpenter McDonald and her family now. Cherokee, Potawatomi, Chippewa, Miami, and Iroquois. Yes. Okay, thank you, Shirley.
I've known Shirley Willard since before I was a teenager, and I'm kind of showing my age now, so I'll be 75 this year. So we've known each other for quite a while.
Yeah, I was Shirley Ogle and you were Joanne Carpenter.
Yeah.
We were kids, riding our ponies together.
Absolutely. Well, I want to tell you about my father. He was a Cherokee, and he didn't know about it, but he went over to Morocco, and that's where he met my mother. And mother was born over there on one of the trails. Only they built a house there, so they took her in the house, and my grandmother had Mama in the house instead of right on the trail this year. She was 104 years old this January the 1st of this year, and I lost Mama at our house. But she went home, and she's going to be waiting for us. But my dad, he was 98 and 1/2 when he left. So he left just a little bit before Mama. They're all waiting on us, and I know they're up there. And that's what they told us. They taught us all about the good Lord above and the homes that He made for us up there. And that we'd better be nice down here and forgive people. And we do. Even though you're here and you're saying that you want us to forgive you, we forgive you too. And we all love you. So it doesn't really make a difference, nowadays. As far as once you get along together, you can patch things up. But like I said, Daddy was Cherokee, Mom was Potawatomi, and her mother was Chippewa. And along comes my daughter. And oh, by the way, this is April 22nd. This is my oldest son's birthday. And then when I had my children, and we walked the walk in 1976 in Detroit. And when we got out there, we found out that the first baby had passed. And that was on September the 5th. Well, my daughter was born on September the 5th. So it's kind of wonder why all these things do happen. But they happen for a purpose. And we're hoping that we find out. But that little girl that was born on the 5th of September, she ended up marrying a Miami Indian. So, and it wasn't long after that, I began checking out genealogy, and I found out that I married an Iroquois. So we have a lot of different Indians in us. So we just really want to tell you that we'll try to do everything we can to help Shirley get going here and keep things going on here at Trail Prairie. And like I said, Mom was even here, and she walked the walk in 76, and she was also here and helped carry the torch when the torch went through. So I don't know what else that we can let you know about. That's about it. Thank you very much.
Joanne mentioned the Trail of Courage. She's referring to our Trail of Courage Living History Festival that we hold the third weekend of September every year since 1976 in South of the Fulton County Museum grounds on US 31. We have a person on there most of you have met today, Carrie Steiner, Indianapolis, and she's with the Indiana Native American Indian Commission. So she's going to tell us more about the Indians of today in Indiana.
Thank you, Shirley, and good afternoon, everyone. I really am honored that you asked me to be here today. I appreciate the time that you've given me to speak a little bit. It's a great honor to be gathered on the land that was once occupied by the Miami and the Potawatomi, and is still occupied by the Miami and the Potawatomi. And I'm sure many of you in this room hear the same thing that I hear pretty often every day in my job, which is, I didn't know there were still Indians in Indiana. Yes, there are quite a few actually. And if we look at the 2010 census, we can take that number for what it's worth, if you will, because that census identified those who are a single race. In other words, full-blooded, which there are a number of those, but as we well know, those things change over the years. So if you take that number and look at those who are multiple race, who are identified, or if we look at the Miami of Indiana, for example, who were once enrolled and through a shady deal in the middle of the night lost that, but are still every bit as Indian as those who carry a card with a federally recognized tribe, we could be looking at 40 to 60,000 natives in the state. So I enjoy when people say there's still Indians in Indiana, because it's my opportunity to maybe pass on a little bit of information that they might not have known. Shirley asked me to talk a few minutes, if I can, about our commission, and I'd like to also highlight maybe a little more uplifting spotlight on the Indians of today. We've learned a lot about the history. I've learned way more than what I knew before I walked in these doors, so I'm grateful for that. Our commission is comprised of 17 people, 2 legislative representatives. We have 7 agencies from around the state, like Department of Education, Department of Health, Workforce Development, those things. And then we have 8 natives who are selected by the governor's office. They represent different tribes, and they represent different geographical areas of the state. So that gives us a good opportunity to stay networked, to have representatives in different areas, find out what the concerns and the things that are going on in their communities, and then as a commission from the state level work to try to change things and hopefully make some improvement. And I'm really pleased to say that we've got a really, really good group, and they have done some amazing things over the last couple of years. We've created summer school scholarships for Native Americans and members of the Miami Nation of Indiana, academic scholarships for the school year of $2,500 each. There's 4 of those. We just recently passed our vocational training for those that don't want to go to college but still want a skill, so they can truck driving or home health care or hair soap styling or whatever their ambition may be. So a lot of things have happened in the last couple of years to make some improvements. The areas that we focus on as a commission are education, employment, housing, health, and civil rights. So we've covered the education side pretty good. Employment, we're pretty good for a resource. The vocational training scholarship, I think, is a good launching pad into the better world of employment for Indiana's Indian people. On the health front, our long-term goal is to get a clinic somewhere in central-ish Indiana, maybe a little south of there, so that the folks who live down south don't have to go to Michigan for Indian health care. From a housing standpoint, very few people in Indiana know about the Section 184 program, and that is a it is a federal HUD program that allows Native Americans who are enrolled in a federally recognized tribe to purchase a home, refinance a home, buy land and build a home, or buy an existing home for almost no money down. And it's a guaranteed home loan, so the default rate on those are less than 1% across the country. So if you're enrolled in a federally recognized tribe and didn't know about that program, please look into it, or you're welcome to contact us. On the civil rights front, that kind of captures a lot of things that don't fall under the other 4. One of that area also includes those who are incarcerated. Not one of my favorite statistics to share, but the fact is that in Indiana, Native Americans are incarcerated at a rate second only to black males under the age of 25. And if you think about that, when you look at what our population in this state is versus the incarceration rate, there's a need there. And so part of what I do is travel around to the prisons who do have Native circles where their services are held. Some have sweat lodges, many have drums, many have chanupas, the sacred pipe, and they carry on their traditions as best they can in the Iron House. So we, as a commission, I go and I see what their concerns are. What do they need? What can we do? Try to generate donations of whatever that want or need might be. And a lot of them just want information. I know that my grandfather was full-blooded something, but I don't know anything about that. So I'll put together a pamphlet of information from the tribe's website and send it to that person. So a lot of good things are happening. On a personal note, People ask me why, because just for the record, I'm not Native. Thought I was, like many people like me thought I was, but grew up and did the research and found out not a drop. But something touched me in 1992. I went to my first powwow in Lebanon, Indiana, and went into the circle and felt spiritually like I was at home. And I know from an Indian perspective, you'll hear that a lot from people who go to powwow gatherings, but it's a true story for me. One of the most touching moments, and some of you have heard this before, those of you in the room that know Leroy Malater, I was walking around the vendor booths that day, and I happened to mention the beautiful beadwork on somebody's costume. Yep, I said the word because I didn't know. And Leroy, in his sweet spirit, pulled me off to the side and explained to me that we don't call it a costume, it's regalia or an outfit. And it was so sweet and kind and gentle and educated me in a way that touched my heart, so that it resonated, and I realized how little I knew and how much I had taken for granted. And that white privilege, I'm sorry to say, I was embedded in that deeply. So I started doing my homework, and I started asking questions, and I tried to be a good listener and a good watcher. And as time went on, I got more and more involved, became a volunteer with the American Indian Center, worked on the newsletter. That's how I've gotten to know Shirley, more through email probably than in person, but we've known each other that way for quite some time. And I've said it to individuals along the way that as a Caucasian, white person, Irish, German, you pick it, and I probably got it, I felt terrible for what had happened, and I didn't know how to make an atonement for that. So I tried to put my thoughts and my feelings into action and become an advocate. And that's really all I could do, and that's all I can ever be, is an advocate for the people who I felt were treated misjustly. And it's also interesting that I always like to, when we talk about that injustice, make a correlation that some folks can identify with, maybe in a way that they didn't recognize. If you look at the history of the natives and a lot of what we've heard today, that history is shared by the African American people who were taken from their land and put into a place that was not their home and expected to perform, if you will, in a certain way, to be a certain kind of person. And then if you want to look at our Jewish people who were subject to genocide beyond human comprehension. And that's the same thing that happened to the Native brothers and sisters when they were removed of these reservations. We haven't talked much about things like the boarding school or the sterilization that took place, or the fact that body parts were removed viciously so that stories couldn't be shared of what happened on those trails of tears and trails of death. So there's a lot of sadness in that history. But what I'd like to do is turn that around, since we've talked about that a lot today, and look at some of the great positives. Native Americans have accomplished, through all of that history, accomplished things that don't get the media recognition that so many other things do. 5-time gold medal Olympic champion, Jim Thorpe. Astronauts going to the moon. Aerospace engineers sitting in this room. Yes, you heard the chuckle, so we know who that is, and that was intentional. Because I want people to understand what I didn't know and that I've learned is that they're everywhere. They're doing everything we're doing. They're teachers. They are prima ballerinas, if you look at Maria Tallchief, members of Congress, teachers, authors, playwrights, students, parents, leaders in various capacities. So there is a lot of good that's come out of a really horrible history. And I think that should be applauded myself. I don't know that if I would have been subject to that, I don't know that I would come out shining quite as brightly as this group of people have done. So I would just like to reaffirm my own personal sorrow for what's happened. And I would also like to say that as long as I have anything to say about it, I will always be an advocate I will always include the Miami of Indiana in everything that we do as much as we possibly can. And I would encourage all of you, and especially thanks to bringing the young people here today, because these are the future storytellers. These are the folks out of these children sitting here today. I hope each one of you have remembered one little thing that you didn't know before. And when you grow up, you can help raise smarter children that know more than I did when I was growing up, and many of the people in this room. So thank you again for the few minutes I had, and I appreciate it. If anybody's interested in the American Indian Commission, IN.gov, and then Google Native American. That's the way to find it.
Here, so Katarina, will you come up? And she's the one who wrote it.
Thank you, Shirley and Father Mike, and for gathering us together for this wonderful event. And thank you to Potawatomi and Miami peoples for being our original hosts as well on this land. I wrote this litany for a pilgrimage class. As Jason and Nancy have shared, Mennonites have started this journey of learning the story of Potawatomi removal, learning who the people were where our ancestors came to settle. So we started this class. The first one was in 2015. There were some people here who were pilgrims on that journey, and we would go along tracing the route similar to the caravan, get out and stop along the way at each marker that surely the Potawatomi Trail of Death Association, many people have been so instrumental at marking the trail that we can actually see where they camped, where people died along the way, where children died. And it was just powerful to be able to stop, to pray, to sing together. And I wrote this so that we could stand and just feel in our own spirits and hearts, to feel moved and to offer prayer at each one of those markers. We'll be doing the pilgrimage again this year, actually starting June 1st. So if you're interested, see me and I can share more information about that. I will be reading this for the Trail of Death, with the Trail of Death and Potawatomi people in mind, and also today for Miami people, to all the removals and death that happened from peoples removed from Indiana. I'm going to invite you to stand, recognizing that we stand where Potawatomi people once walked, where they still walk today, and where near the street where this removal passed through in Rochester. And Father Mike will be helping to lead the people's response in bold. So I invite you to read, when you come to the bold text, to read together. Standing where you walked, we remember you. Exile under gunpoint, loss of sacred land, we remember you. Bruised feet and weary bodies, choked by dust and heat, sickness stalking young and old, we remember you. We lament this trail of death, trail of broken promises, theft of homelands for white man's profits. We lament this trail of death. We lament that our ancestors did not dwell in peace.
Creator of all, we long for new visions today.
Open our eyes and give us sight.
To seek the things that make for peace. To see the image of God in all peoples.
Especially those persecuted and oppressed. Make a new way for us together.
Guide our feet, O Lord, on a trail of life.
I think many of you were aware of what was going on this summer about Standing Rock. Okay. Anyway, Wes Clark Jr.'s military apology took place then, and I saw it on the internet, and it was so touching and moving that I felt like it needed to be a part of this. It was given to Leonard Crow Dog, and we have a man here whose last name is D. Crow. So I don't know if he's related to Leonard Crow Dog or not, but we'd like him to come forward and to read that apology. We're very thankful for you.
Thank you, Shirley. Good afternoon. Wes Clark Jr., the son of retired U.S. Army General and former Supreme Commander of NATO, Wesley Clark Sr., apologized to Lakota spiritual leader and medicine man, Chief Leonard Crow Dog at Standing Rock. It's my honor to represent both them and the United States military in this sincere apology. Many of us, particularly me, are from units that have hurt you over many years. We came, we fought you, we took your land. We signed treaties that we broke. We stole minerals from your sacred hills. We blasted the faces of our presidents onto your sacred mountain. We still took more land, and when we took your children, then we tried to make your language, and we tried to eliminate your language that God gave you, that the Creator gave you. We didn't respect you. We polluted your earth. We've hurt you in so many ways, but we've come to say that we are sorry. We are at your service, and we beg for your forgiveness. God bless. Thank you.
The apology to the Potawatomi is on the back page. Father Mike asked for the Potawatomi representative and the Miami representatives to come forward so that we can read the apology to you, and then you can respond however you like. Janet, you too. Where you at, Janet? Here you go. We do. What I started to say is that the governor's committee said they would not issue an apology and they would not criticize the government. But they did declare this, and they did acknowledge the things that happened. So that's a step in the right direction. Okay, so we're going to read this together. Beginning with whereas. You know, you got a bunch of whereases in these things. Okay.
Whereas in the period of 1820 to 1851, many Native American Indians were forced to leave Indiana and go west of the Mississippi River so that white settlers could purchase their land. We acknowledge the loss of homeland, suffering, and death which resulted, and the deep depression that still exists. The Indiana government did not foresee the tragic results. Our hearts go out to the descendants, and we wish to make a treaty of the heart with them. Whereas in this year, following the Indiana Bicentennial, the 200th anniversary of Indiana's becoming a state in 1816, we acknowledge the human error made by the Indiana governor in 1838 in authorizing militia to round up the Potawatomi and forcibly march them to Kansas. This forced immigration is known as the Trail of Death because over 40 died on the way and are buried in unmarked graves. Whereas the Miami tribe was forced to leave Peru, Indiana
we thank you for coming here today to express your empathy for the plight of the Potawatomi and all the Indian tribes that were driven out of Indiana. We know that you feel our collective pain in losing all that we had at the hands of the U.S. and the state government officials. That is why I am here today speaking to you. I have told my children the stories, and they have told their children. And now their children are educating the young on what it means to be Potawatomi, not only of what we lost, but all that we have gained in the subsequent years. Please tell your children and grandchildren that it is the concern and the love that we show, that is being shown to us today, that has helped us survive this terrible crisis of the past. We are glad you are here, and we wish to bond together in solidarity. Thank you for coming together to celebrate our collective future success. Please don't forget our past. Let us promise here and now not to let history repeat itself. Never forget the Potawatomi story of the Trail of Death.
Thank you very much for coming today. The only reason that I know these stories is because my father told them to me, and his mother told him. So please continue to tell the story. Thank you.
I pretty much summed it up for Miami Nation too. It was excellent words. Under God and in the house of the Lord, I'd also like to offer prayer up on behalf of the Miami Nation from Chief Thomas Richardville. So you'd all join me in it's Miami language, but it is the Lord's Prayer. Rusena kes kiangi wakiani, mechela mekoke ke wonzoname. Akimwa yotokani. Wah napakari is neleani metoki angi napwinish nake ke keshkongi. Melanumi nuki kakikwe, newawana kanamanani. Nehe, pelaki lo, neluna masana hamangi. Ish nilaguna wana pelaki angi, masana hamama and cheki. Te eshe, shikwelalumi melaki ganji. Kitaka timwa yotokani, kitebe te mani kipeko ni meki mujak maka. And the way in waita, I hope God bless. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much for putting this event together. It was beautiful, and I hope that you take from this the importance of teaching the next generation the correct history of the Native Americans from Indiana. Thank you.
Immediately following our program, which will be ending with this song, there are refreshments over at our parish hall. There is lots of materials to go through. There's some books and DVDs that are available. And encourage everyone to go over there because there are plenty of cookies.
And hoe cakes.
And hoe cakes, sorry. Yes. Let us conclude in song, please stand. Peace is flowing like a river, flowing out for you and me, floating out into the desert, setting all the captives free. Love is flowing like a river, flowing
in back of the church. You can sign the apology there and leave your address and email if you want to keep in touch with us. There is a possibility there'll be a second Indiana Indian Day planned for next year, but not me. It's going to be somebody else. You can see the proclamation Governor Holcomb sent. There will be refreshments, exhibits, the Potawatomi Trail of Death documentary called Like Birds in a Windstorm that Susan made, and books for sale. And those who wish are welcome to join us at Pizza Hut Party Room at 6 p.m. tonight to eat and continue fellowship Dutch treat. We thank you all for coming and wish you a safe trip home. So let's head to the parish hall now. Lots of hugs to all of you.